Oceans podcast, everybody.
All right, people. It's time.
Of the float world.
Right, that specific subsect of people.
Who
time
also
for another-
listens to our podcast.
Okay. All right. Hi to the 3 people out there. It's really nice of you to join us.
We're here for you.
Yeah. Not you on the left, but the other 2.
Okay, so today's question is, what's the difference between sea salt and float salt? And what the heck is dead sea salt?
Okay. Interesting. Well, I'm going to go ahead and separate these into the delicious and not delicious categories.
It's pretty much how we separate everything in our lives.
Yeah, that's kind of the base 1 classification that I go into here. So if you try to eat float salt, it's not delicious. That's the first thing you should really know. It does not taste good. You'll probably only do it once and then realize that you never want that in your mouth ever again. And
dead sea salt, too, is also in the not delicious category.
That's not delicious. However, are we talking about, what was the other side?
Sea salt, regular sea salt, not
regular
dead.
sea salt.
Live sea salt.
Yeah, is very delicious. I
especially
wish,
out of ocean water.
Yeah, like sometimes I will just take scoops of ocean water and sprinkle it over my breakfast.
Over your cereal?
Yeah. Yes.
Right, and so it's because the basic chemical composition of these things is different, right? They're not actually salts are something that forms, that's a structure of molecules that forms into this kind of crystalline lattice. But the molecules that are going into them can be completely different, right? You can have chlorine salts as well, in a sense.
Like sodium chloride, chlorine salts? Like table salt?
Right, so that's the first one, right? Table salt is sodium chloride.
Yep. And that, again, delicious category. So the sea salt is basically a completely different chemical than what is in the float tank, which is magnesium sulfate. So those are the most specific of these. The dead sea salts is, as far as I know, like a mix of things. Like,
right, yeah, it's mostly, I think, sodium chloride.
Yeah.
And then with just a bunch of other minerals and things that have kind of accumulated and mixed in.
So it's different percentages of different things, of different types of salt. And I don't really know much more about the actual breakdown of dead sea salts other than that.
Yeah, nor do I. But for the sake of this conversation, I think that the main question really is about what makes our float tank salt. Why can't someone just buy a bunch of salt from the store and pour it into a float tank?
Well, you can. Actually, you can buy a bunch of salt from the store and pour it into a float tank.
We've been doing it wrong this entire time?
Yeah, and in fact, it would be cheaper. Like, I've seen 50-pound bags of sodium chloride at Costco for like $10 or something.
Yeah.
And a little piece of float history, that's actually how it started with float tanks. I mean, there was many, many years of just water. And then when they first started... No salt. Zero salt. And when they first started introducing salt into it in an attempt to make the water more buoyant, they started with sodium chloride, table salt, and got it up to that kind of same level of saturation, and basically just found that if you had any sort of small cut or abrasion or something like that, it would sting, and it just would not stop stinging. And it was, as much as it did help and make you float, it was really uncomfortable to actually be in.
Yeah. So that's essentially the main reason for not doing that. Like, that's why even if you could get it cheaper, you don't just want to go down to the store and use table salt, is because it's way harsher on people. And those stings are from cuts that you have, which you really can still feel in a float tank very much, don't really go away with the table salt nearly as much. So that's why people don't do that.
And the Epsom salt, on the other hand, still stings. Like, you're not going to get away from that. But it seems to only sting for a few minutes, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes. And then after that, it kind of fades away and you're good to go. So it's much less intense, and you can actually still float as long as you're willing to, either be a little bit uncomfortable for a few minutes, or put, if it's a small enough little scrape or something, put some of that petroleum jelly on it and make a little force field around it.
And because there's health benefits associated with the Dead Sea and floating in it, and that sort of has its own lore going along with it, just to loop back around to Dead Sea salts as well. I think there's this, why can't I fill my float tank with Dead Sea salt is the exact same reason as table salt, which is it's also mainly sodium chloride. It's also going to be way harsher on your skin and just not as pleasant an experience. That said, I do know some float tank centers who sprinkle dead sea salt into their float tanks alongside it. So maybe 10% dead sea salts and the rest of, 90% of the salt being magnesium sulfate.
Yeah, even 10% is much higher than I normally hear. I often hear of people putting like even just a few cups in or
a scoop.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's also an option. We've never played around with it. So I have no idea how that actually turns out functionally, but I kind of can't imagine that it actually makes that much of a difference on the perception, at least, or the abrasion from having it in there.
Yeah, I would be surprised if you could feel a difference on cuts on your body or anything like that. I don't know if there are actual health benefits or not. I think we're still trying to figure out how much you can absorb stuff like that through your skin. So that's a bit of an unknown.
Yep, for any of these two. Eating salt, floating in salt, floating in dead sea salt.
Well, eating salt, I think we know gets
it's
into
great
our
for
body.
you. We know it gets in, but I mean, it's like I feel like every year there's a different argument back about how beneficial or not salt is.
Yeah, that's true.
So, just like the medical world, we're in a huge quandary about the benefits of certain things.
Yeah.
All right, so hopefully that answered your question. Yeah. And we'll be here same time tomorrow, so tune back in.
Yeah. If you guys have any questions of your own you want us to answer, just hop on to floattanksolutions.com/podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.